Welcome everybody behind the Patreon. In this episode, we're getting a little bit loose with it, and we're going to be talking about the gaming differences, the taste in gaming between Japan and America, and what we can see in as far as the Europe as well, maybe a little bit too, Mike.
And to let folks know, of course, this is not anything exhaustive or anything with extensive research. This is a little bit of discussion based on our experiences in both regions.
Yeah, and how things have been changing over the years and things like that. Again, yeah, this is completely anecdotal. This is not science at all whatsoever. This is just opinions, and I would like to get a Japanese person on at some point to get their opinion on this exactly, but for right now, it's just going to be us. But so let's start like back in the retro gaming days. Mike, and go in order chronologically. So like, let's go like 8-bit, 16-bit era. You'd say there was a pretty big difference in taste even then, correct?
Well, I mean, if you look at the libraries, to compare, of course, Japan is where they were making these things. So they're going to make things for the market first. So it was, what are they going to check to go see what can actually be exported to the North American region? So naturally, they're going to have more of a spread. And I think that, yeah, we do see, if we look back at the Famicom and stuff, there's just so much more available and such a different selection of genres.
Than even like the previous Atari generation? Is what you're saying?
That I don't know. Because Atari, of course, started in North America. So I'm not sure how that really compares. Because by the time we got there to examine anything, it's like, well, I don't know what Atari had really in Japan, because it fell apart in North America. So I don't even know.
I don't think Atari had a big hold in Japan, but Space Invaders was made by Japan, and Pac-Man as well. So
yeah.
There must have been some presence.
Yeah.
Of Atari. Actually, that'd be another interesting episode. Like, what was Japan gaming on during the Atari age? But
well, I would think at that time it was the what did they call them? It was like they were Space Invaders, like bars or something. Like they weren't arcades. They were just like little places where you go to play Space Invaders. You had the nice little cocktail tables and stuff.
It was just that. In beta game is what they called it.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah, huge hit, man. Huge hit.
But in the time that we were there, and I would go around to all the used game shops, and I would see all the stuff, on the Famicom, I would just be like, wow, there's just so much more different stuff. It really is. It could be something simple like a Mahjong game. Like,
oh, right.
Mahjong games in North America were with the double G, and they're a solitaire tile kind of thing. And they were pretty rare. We did get one called Shanghai on the Master System, but I don't think I ever saw that on the NES. And there were multiple Mahjong games on the Famicom.
Oh, man. Jumping ahead a little bit, but I remember the N64, one of the launch titles was a shogi game.
Oh, nice.
in Japan, but did not make it, of course, to the American launch. But that was probably one of the first times I ever heard about shogi. Was that reading about that in EGM. So I think that the seeds planted from day one. And Matt Alt gets into this too, where you see it start to really spring up with Pac-Man, because Space Invaders is still kind of the American aesthetic of like, we're still trying to be a little badass. I mean, it's cutesy because the graphics couldn't do much else. But it was like you were like a space guy shooting aliens. So there was a little bit of something badass about it. But Pac-Man, the kawaii culture, officially seeps in. And this was apparently totally new for anybody in the West. Because, again, it was about... And you see this for years and years. Like, it was all about being badass, never about being cute. Never about, I mean, it's about having fun, but just kind of like really from a strong, like a lot more testosterone in it. than
Yeah,
the
yeah. I
Japanese
mean, we
side.
could see in that era. Like I remember getting Dragon Warrior one Christmas, and the box art for that is really beautiful. It's fantastic box art, but it's got like nothing to reflect what's in the game. And I think that they changed some of the sprites in the game too. But this was clearly like Akira Toriyama artwork. You know, the Arare-chan, Dragon Ball, and all that stuff. And it was very cutesy, even though it was like Western fantasy setting. But when they brought it to North America, we got that like glorious painting of the dragon warrior. And it was just like, let's erase all of this cutesy stuff because it needs to be tougher than this, you know?
Yeah, this is really the main difference. I mean, there's other differences, but I can't think of a bigger difference in this between the East and the West as far as gaming. It continues to this day, but it is melding together more and more because we're becoming a monoculture worldwide, I think, for better or worse.
And at the same time that we're sort of a monoculture, we're also providing seemingly infinite space for subcultures, which is kind of cool too, you know? It's simultaneously harder to find something that everybody has enjoyed and easier to find something to enjoy with a select group of people. It's really, I don't know. It's been a change. That's all I can really say.
With everything, with there being so many offerings, so many games.
Yeah.
People are going to just find like exactly what they want. So I can see that. Yeah, maybe the new thing in gaming will people just being like super specialized in one thing, whereas you and I kind of grew up playing a little bit of everything. Yeah. Except for sports games. I mean, every now and again, but
I did play a lot of sports games. I abandoned them once it became clear that they were moving to like a yearly model. So I think I played like what was that? Lakers versus Celtics, and then it was like Bulls versus Lakers, and then they started calling it by the year and stuff, and that's when I kind of dropped off with that. And like I played Joe Montana football and all that, but eventually it was just like, this is not for me. I don't really care how the stats change year to year. I don't care what player is featured. It doesn't matter. If you have a good game, I will play it, whatever sport it is. But if it's something clearly designed on a yearly model, I tend to ignore it.
I mean, NBA Jam also that was the only one really that we played regularly. And then my brother, amazingly enough, did get NFL Blitz, but that was like an NBA Jam of football kind of sort of deal.
Yeah, I think those games, I did not see them really when I was in Japan. I didn't see arcade cabinets with those games.
Those are super American, man, especially American football shit.
So to talk about that, you know, like these are some differences. Like those games, I think are fantastic games. It doesn't matter if you know football. It doesn't matter if you know basketball. They're really great games, and you could get into them and have a good time with them. It doesn't matter if you know who John Starks is. You can still shoot the ball with him.
Right.
You know, like I used to play this NCAA game on the Super Nintendo. I didn't know who anybody was. I didn't even know people cared about colleges playing sports. Like, why was that a thing? But no.
That's huge in the South, man, because no one has, like Alabama doesn't have an NFL team, for example.
That's pretty crazy.
It's all about the college sports.
Yeah,
it's insane.
I can't wrap my head around college sports. Like, I've watched college football, and I've just been like, why would I watch this? The professionals are just so much better. It's just miles better.
Here's the thing. If I watch them, I can't even tell who's better and who's not. I am so out of it when it comes to sports. Well, with skateboarding, I can because I grew up skateboarding. But when it with like team sports, it's just like, I don't want to piss anybody off listening to this, but it's just like grown men running around a field throwing a ball around. I could fucking have no idea what the fuck is going on.
Most sports, if I had the option, I would rather play than watch. You know, if I could just have a group of friends, let's play a little basketball. You know, we used to play sewer cap to sewer cap football all the time. Like we had a lot of fun.
Sewer cap to sewer cap.
That's how you do in New York. You know, and we get mad when somebody didn't put a blinker on because we usually were at like close to an intersection where
Oh my
that sewer
God.
cap was there. So like if they were going to turn, then we didn't have to stop necessarily, depending on where we
man.
were on our field. But then they
Dude.
would just like all of a sudden whip out the left turn and you'd be like, God damn it.
When I look back, when I see my friends, I would call them acquaintances at this point, but the people that I grew up with in Alabama, I left Alabama when I was in 98. So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But when I look at their pictures on Facebook, unless they're inside, it looks like they're in the woods all the time.
Oh, really?
Like,
Did you spend a lot of time in the woods as a kid there?
Here's the thing. When you're in that kind of country, every time you're outside kind of looks like the woods because there's no city. And also, I've talked about this on Facebook one time. Like, out in the country like that, there's no kind of idea of a suburb because we're so far removed from any city. You're beyond suburban. It's just how, like, suburb kind of feels like there's neighborhoods that are
right. The suburbs don't exist without herbs.
Yeah, you need the herb, and then you need they're planned like subdivisions and shit. You know what I mean? But houses in the country, it's just like houses almost kind of randomly on roads. You know, it's a little wild. But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, sorry, folks.
We're back to it. So Japan has always had an eye for that kawaii culture and that kind of cute chibi design as well. And you see that with Mario too. And then when Japan started to really take over with NES and Super Nintendo, I think that's whenever, everybody started to change their opinion. But even then, there was
I would say it took a lot
pushback.
Longer than that. I would say it took a lot longer. Yeah.
There were games selling though they were selling more than they used to probably. The kind of cutesy looking ones. But yeah, you're right. When would you say it actually turned over? Well,
before that, I wanted to say something too about how the different games that I saw that were available on the Famicom in Japan. Like I think there was this there's like that train game. I don't even remember what it's called, but it's kind of like a Mario Party kind of game. I'm sure it was before Mario Party, but like everybody plays on almost like a board game, and it's a train thing.
I don't remember this. I need the name.
I would have looked this up if I had thought in advance about it. But basically what I'm getting at here is I felt like when I was looking at the variety of Famicom games on the shelves that they were casting a much wider net for their audiences. I felt like they had things there that were like, okay, here's your Mahjong game. That's not for, like, most of what we saw in America was geared towards a certain age group, a certain demographic. But in Japan, I felt like it was a much wider net. Like, you couldn't have a visual novel like Detective, what is it, Famicom Detective Club or something?
Yeah, that's what it is.
You couldn't really do that in America at the time. Like, no, who's going to read a book as a video game? Like, it's going to be for an older audience. And an older audience is not really playing NES at the time. So I do feel like they did a lot more to offer to different groups than the North American library did.
There's something about Japanese culture that helps them to be really open-minded when it comes to media, any kind of media. Because, I mean, in a lot of cases, especially in those early days, the West was taking their cues eventually from all the violent cartoons because no one ever even thought about making a violent cartoon. No one ever thought about making a visual novel video game. I think Matt Alt talked about this a lot
Ralph
as well.
Bakshi might disagree.
Ralph Bakshi, yeah, but I wonder how much he looked at Japanese stuff as well. I don't know. It was probably a little bit of parallel thought there, but the Japanese are really known for it, kind of countrywide, whereas we just had Ralph Bakshi and maybe a few others.
Yeah, it's definitely. I feel like there's more support across the board of like them not saying. I guess maybe what I feel is that in the past we've had a lot of limited thought regarding certain types of media. And I think that video games were for a very long time perceived as the domain of children. And so you couldn't get a lot of those things that might have appealed to other groups. Just
like manga as well, they were, I think one of the, one of the things people observed when they used to go to Japan back in the day was like, even adults were reading comics over there. I found it so strange. And now look at us now. You know, I remember when I was first kind of reconnecting with other parts of nerd culture. I always stayed with video games pretty much, but I remember when I was getting into comic books again, I felt a little weird watching like Batman cartoons because I felt too old for it. But now I'll just watch whatever. I don't really care. I mean, if it's good, it's good, right? So, and I think it seems like everybody in the West, for the most part, sort of had a similar realization, or I don't know. We're kind of more on the same page now. And then maybe it's getting to another extreme though, because Matt Alt's talking about. We're bringing up Matt Alt a lot in this episode. But kid adults. This is a whole other market now. Yeah. But it's, I don't know. It might be. I don't know. Like, I wonder if it'll swing so far to where like adults are into like actual baby stuff, rattles and things like that. Like, that's going to the extreme. That's extreme, but you never know, man. How open-minded are we going to be with this stuff?
Yeah. Who knows?
I remember I was talking real quick when I was talking with somebody that came into my work. So how can I say this without breaking NDA? It was a mother and a son that had come in, and they were getting something done at my work. Is an actor, a kid actor, and his mom. Okay. The kid starts talking to me about video games because it naturally led there somehow. And I said I loved Mario on Switch and I beat it and all this. And this kid is like, at the time, like 7 or 8. And like, we're having this conversation and the mom is like, give it me the weirdest looks. like, really? You play this kind of game? Because if it was Call of Duty, that'd be one thing. But I was talking about Mario Odyssey. So, but they were Canadian, and I don't know if that means anything to the story, but anyway.
Yeah. There's definitely, I think a stigma remains. I think that despite many, many years of video games obviously becoming a major factor in the entertainment industry, people still have a lot of that holdover in America. And I think that Japan made a lot of good efforts to like make things work for all age groups and involve like celebrities and stuff in weird ways. Remember Onimusha? They used that actor's face, and it's just like, these are things we didn't really do.
They were kind of leading the way. Apparently, like at the moment, Japan's not really at the forefront like it used to be. It kind of like lost that position in like the mid 2000s or something, from what I heard.
Well, the switch over to HD really seemed to be some serious growing pains for Japanese developers.
And online, right? Japan took forever to get online, like death matches and stuff.
Yeah, but they also had some really successful online games, like Final Fantasy XI.
Yeah, I forget about the online Final Fantasies, dude. When I tried to play 14, I'm just so lost, and there's so many menus.
For me, it's really more, I'm not going to pay monthly for this sort of thing.
Oh,
even when I had more free time than I do now, I was just like, I can't be paying every month for a game. If I go a year of playing this game, we're talking $120, say at least, and I'm not going to do that. That's just not how I do these things.
Right.
And then it depends on other people. I don't want that.
That's true. So. Connected to what we were talking about, like the character design. This is it's directly connected. So, like there was some memes like 10 years ago or so, maybe 12, 13 years ago at this point, that kind of showed like in Japan this kind of character is popular, which was like your Clouds or your kind of teenage character, prepubescent, cutesy looking characters, and then Gears of War, Call of Duty, badass dudes, also like 35 to 55, There's always been the exceptions, which are Resident Evil and Metal Gear, which are popular in both countries, and they both have older characters. But outside of that, like the preference is so different.
Yeah, it's really been an interesting thing for me to look at stuff like the RPGs, especially like the Shin Megami Tensei, Persona, and all. And it's just like these stories, these setups, the mythos, it all works really well. But the one thing that always gets me is like, well, why is it always a high schooler? Like, are there no adults? Are adults considered too old? They've already given up somehow on their idealism. Is this a cultural thing? Like, why are we having so much trouble finding strong adult characters in Japanese games, story-driven games?
Yeah, there's a lot of cultural things going on here. They, generally speaking, seemingly anyway, they just don't prefer to see any kind of older character. All of every manga character for the most part, especially the ones that have any kind of success, are always younger. And we're not talking like 18. We're talking like 14 maybe a lot of the time. Like this is and maybe the cultural thing is like, God, they just kind of prefer that look. And like if you've ever seen the word oji-san or osan, it's translated as old man a lot of the time. But do you know at what age they start calling you osan, oji-san?
Yeah, I have no idea where they would make that cutoff.
They start calling you that around 24, man.
Oh, everybody's like Christmas cake almost, huh?
Yeah. No, you're oji-san like pretty early on compared to what we would say in the West.
Damn.
And I don't know if it has anything to do with how you're raised or I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but yeah.
But yeah, it's just it's a very different perception, and it's I don't know what the deal is. I mean, I lived 3 years there. I never felt that I was like the recipient of any sort of age discrimination. I never felt that anyone thought differently of me for being a certain age, as if I couldn't potentially be the protagonist in my own story. I don't really know what was going on there. But like, if I look at, I feel like a lot of the characters we see in Western developed stories will be sort of more aspirational adults with even like, let's look at something like Star Wars, right? Luke is meant to be 17. 17 in 1977 has a very different feel to 17 now, really. Obviously, it's the culture changes, but like he felt like an adult there was a shift within that first movie.
You're saying people are less mature now for longer.
Well, yeah, I think so. And I think that's a problem culturally, where we have this prolonged infantilization, this refusal to accept that young people are perfectly capable and that they are growing as adults. And we look at it like, oh, you can't come into this society until you've completed all these things. And by the time you finish school, you're already 22. And it's like, all right, well, traditionally, someone would say at about 16, like, I don't really want to finish high school. I'm going to go start working at the factory and buy a house at 18 on my single salary to support a family of 4, because that's just how we used to roll. And then the economy completely shifted, and they were like, oh, let's just make it impossible for anyone to support a family of 4. But that's a whole other story. But it's not exactly. It all does tie in. I feel like we refuse to accept young people as adults. The 18 is now really looked as, this is still a child. And,
right. I think you're right.
It's not really the case for a lot of people,
I think you're right. And again, it's good that this is getting off topic almost, but hell, let's go into it. It's good to be open-minded about the media you consume and all that. Like, look at me. I'm surrounded by video games and fucking comic books. I'm a kidult in some form or fashion, but I try to keep one foot in reality too, man. I'm 2 years away from being 40 at this point. And
And I'm 2 years past it.
You're 2 years past it. And it's just like, I don't know. Yeah, people just have to, you have to be reminded of like your age at a certain point. You have to find that balance. It is tough finding that balance, and society's swinging really far one way probably, but and Japan again was kind of like the first to do that. It seems like it's so strange. There's so many things in Japan that are seemingly happen first. Everybody will call them weird, and then the same shit will happen to us. Like cosplay, I remember everybody thought that shit was weird at first. You're dressing up like a fucking anime character. Now look at us. Look at all the West dressing up as like, well, Star Wars, Superman, whatever the fuck. Cosplay became huge. And I know it was always around even in the 77.
Star Trek, yeah.
With Star Wars and Star Trek. But the whole like making armor and like how much more involved it got, that really is like Japan was the first to be doing that, it seems like. So... yeah, it's like they're the canary in the coal mine almost. Japan, the birth gap ships happening worldwide. It just happened first in Japan. All kinds of shit like that. Another cultural difference I noticed, and you'll know this as a fighting game fan, is like, if we get beyond the designs for a second, especially in the 90s, games always felt so clunky if they're made in the West. They controlled like shit. And then when you played a Japanese game, smooth as butter for the most part, you know? And it always felt
responsive.
Like, why is that? Like, why can't they, like, if you look at like the movement with Sakuga, especially in anime, and like the movement.
That was the keyframe, was it?
Yeah, that's the section where they really focused on movement, because it was like two extremes, right? Like kind of static, like visual manga looking shit, and then amazing animation. So let's just focus on the amazing part. Like the movement was incredible. Think Akira, think the opening to Thundercats even, that was a Japanese company. Think, all this great dynamic movement animation. And then the movement in video games too was so much better too. So this has always been like a conspiracy theory of mine. And again, this is probably bullshit, but does something have to do with their martial arts history that influenced how they see movement that makes them better at it than we are? At least how we used to be anyway. I
mean, I can't prove or disprove it one way or the other, but I mean, this is a country whose animation techniques were born out of, basically wanting for more, not being able to produce more. And so limited animation was really mastered by them. And so I think that that extends into video games. There's a strong sense of what animation is most important and what animation can be glossed over. Whereas despite, like in America, the big watermark, the high watermark for animation was always like Disney, and it has beautiful stuff. And you could see when they stepped in, the Disney animators, to work on Aladdin and stuff on the Genesis, that looked fantastic.
Yeah.
But as we saw with things like Mortal Kombat and all, it just, wow, that was stiff as anything, man.
That's the thing. I was going to bring that up. Like, Street Fighter is really like butter. And I like Mortal Kombat, dude. I think it's a great game. I've liked all the good ones. I have the same basic opinion everybody else has pretty much about Mortal Kombat. But it's stiff. And it's still stiff to this day. But it's less stiff than it used to be. I think it's almost a style at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think that it was easier for them to have it be a little less stiff once they moved to 3D models rather than the digitized sprites. But I still find it really stiff and clunky. Like the animations, to me, their moves, I haven't really played much of the more recent Mortal Kombat. I think 11. I played some of 10. I ended up playing more Injustice because I was running a game club at the school at that time, and the kids liked Injustice. But I remember even that, I would watch it and be like, the animation is just not being sold to me. Like, I don't feel like that was a strong hit. The arm barely moved. Like, I don't I felt like nothing happened on the screen, and then the other character went flying. It was just weird. I just felt really unimpressed by it.
I like Injustice 2, but I know what you're saying. It's all there. That's stiff as well. It's a little smoother than it used to be, but there's still just something about Mortal Kombat. Maybe just because I've been playing it since I was a kid. I'll always get like day one purchase. Like it's just one of those things for me. Man, Jeremy Parrish on Retronauts was like he took a shit on Mortal Kombat. He doesn't like it.
Basically, for me, it was Mortal Kombat 1 was really down here. Mortal Kombat 2 was a huge jump. I loved the color palette was bright. Everything about it felt fun and vibrant, and it was a lot of new stuff to explore. It was cool. I loved the idea of babalities or friendships or whatever that like I almost never saw because I wasn't good enough for that. But then 3 came along, and I felt like I don't know, 3 just kind of sucked a lot of the life out of it. That combo system to me felt really kind of staccato. It just didn't feel right dialing in those combos. And then I never really played Mortal Kombat again. I went back for a little bit on 9 when it was like a reboot, but it just was never really that good for me again.
I didn't really realize that 3 was held in such low regard until recent years, because when I was a kid, it was like, wow, more moves, more characters,
Yeah.
So I was into it, especially Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, where they had all the characters.
Yeah.
So that was like the best. But looking back, I can see why 2 is held in such high regard. It was a really good one.
Think about all those arcades, you went to in Japan. Like, did you ever see a Mortal Kombat machine?
This is the thing. I'm glad we're getting back on topic. Thanks for bringing this up. It's like this is like what I was talking about with a lot of the guests in the free show for Gaming Gaiden. Japan, unless it's like Disney or something, they're just so content with their own media. There's no He-Man conventions. There's no Simpsons conventions. There's no Mortal Kombat love. Like, if it's not Street Fighter, if it's not Japanese made with a Japanese taste, generally speaking, they're not into it. I mean, that's changing, and we'll get into that in a minute, but you know what I mean? Yeah, there was never... They brought up Mortal Kombat in High Score Girl. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I only watched like one episode. I didn't really take to it. Even though it was like right in my wheelhouse, I was just like, this feels like, what do you call it? It was kind of like a Ready Player One kind of thing for me, where it's like...
Too much fan service?
Let's throw a bunch of name check stuff out there, and like,
I liked it enough. I mean, and actually my wife got into it too a little bit. But by
the way, just to say, Ready Player One, the movie was enjoyable. The book was not very good at all. I think it needed to be a movie. I think the movie saved it, made it worthwhile.
I listened to Will Wheaton read that audiobook. I liked that. I liked it okay. I mean, I think it was a little bit overblown.
That's the thing.
It wasn't the best thing ever.
It was a perfect example of a picture being worth 1,000 words. Like, it is a whole page of him listing like a bunch of characters who are like at this big battle or whatever, and I'll be like, yeah, if a camera just pans over them, that's a lot more effective than being like, oh yes, comma this character, comma that character. It wasn't strong writing. It was strong storytelling. It was definitely engaging. It was fun, but there's nothing about any of that prose or development that's going to stay with anyone. And I think that the movie did everything that it was going to do in the book and did it better.
I mean,
that's a whole other story.
they're both okay to me. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, Japan's just like super, even to this day, for the most part, kind of like what I was saying in the other episodes, there's such a very large subculture for Japanese and Japan love Japanese video games, manga, anime in America and the world. And not just America, but worldwide. But Japan doesn't really have that, unless it's like... Only thing I can find a parallel there is Disney. I can't think of anything else.
I think it's because you're thinking about it in terms of our ken. These are the spheres that we generally work within. But if you look at something like jazz music or whiskey, right? Even when I was first there in 2001, it was like Japanese whiskey was this laughable thing. And now it's like, okay, it's serious stuff. People
Are you a whiskey
enjoying
guy?
it. No, I'm not. But I just, I would drink it and be like, yeah, sure, it's good. I like it. Whatever. I don't care.
Highballs or whatever.
I'm not someone who's going to be like, oh, yes, I love this particular 20-year vintage, whatever it is. I don't care. I honestly couldn't care less. I don't even drink anymore. But what I'm saying is they do have plenty of things that they get very into from outside of Japanese culture that end up getting imported there. And eventually there's the Japanese version of it, right?
That is true.
And so the thing is, if it's something like Mortal Kombat, right? The simple question is, well, is Mortal Kombat doing anything better than what the Japanese fighting games have to offer? And I think for a lot of people, the answer is no. So why would there be a big scene for it? Unless somebody is a big, like, gore fan. I don't know.
That's the thing. And they've got J-horror and gore out the yin-yang, But it's like, I don't know. It has to be done in their own way. There's a lot of gore in Biohazard, Resident Evil. It's known for that, but it's just a little different. And I think I've heard there's still some trepidation with the Marvel movies in Japan, although there has been a lot of strides. Like, people are watching them, but there's apparently...
Yeah, that's all after my time, really.
There's a little bit of some pushback because there's, like, the humor they're not getting probably or whatever, and there's... I don't know. They're not as into it as the rest of the world, but they are getting more into it than they used to be, for sure. That's what I gather.
I would think, and this is something this is a somewhat criticism of America and our sense of maturity and legitimacy regarding media, that I think that the washed out color palette of most of the MCU movies is a result of that kind of thing. Like, oh, well, this can't be taken seriously if it has bright colors. Then people will think it's like the 66 Batman, which I think is the best Batman personally. That's a whole other story too. But
they're usually pretty colorful, aren't they?
I think most of the Marvel movies have really very realistic looks to everything. They don't look cartoony or colorful or outlandish, whereas I want everything kind of to be like Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, well,
so I don't know if maybe there's just that visual thing is not really there to appeal as much because it doesn't pop. It doesn't stand out, most of it.
They could spend a little bit more on their cinematography, I think, because I mean, Thor, this is a whole other topic. I have a whole other podcast for this kind of thing.
but this is related to this. I mean, this is me trying to explore why it is that certain things are appealing and certain things are not, right? Where's that visual pop there? Where's the cuteness? Where's the appeal? Where's the color? Where's the liveliness? So and if it's missing, then it's not going to succeed.
Superhero thing, talking about differences, Spider-Man's the only one that really has any kind of cultural relevance. There was a Japanese TV show. That's what spawned Super Sentai. Power Ranger stuff directly. I thought that was a conspiracy theory, but no, it's not. It literally did. Yeah. So Spider-Man and Power Rangers are connected historically.
Wow.
Yeah. And, also Hideo Kojima talks about this specifically. Spider-Man, he's also younger. So that.
Yeah, that's true.
Full face mask. He's got cute little high school girl problems, which Japan eats the fuck up. And his body is not super jacked. He looks svelte, and this is more in line with Japanese heroes also. And not even to mention Kamen Rider is a bug. He's a grasshopper. So you have a kind of a grasshopper hero and a spider hero, and you have the Kabuto Mushi, the beetle Borgs and shit. The bug aesthetic is real big in Japan. So Spider-Man pretty easily is the number one. I remember in 2008, The Dark Knight comes out. I'm living in Japan. I'm flipping my fucking shit. I fucking loved it. It was all I talked about for a while. And I saw it twice in Japan, twice in America. 4 times in the theater. No one even fucking knew it was out. Like the Japanese people I was talking to, but it was a big hit everywhere else.
Yeah.
You know, like Batman is just really specifically American, but Spider-Man also the full face mask probably helps. Just people to kind of sync, like, you know, representation kind of thing, see themselves in the hero. But yeah, that's the only character that kind of like really made it. And the Tobey Maguire movies were apparently pretty big too, but yeah, I don't know, like,
yeah,
it's an interesting topic for sure, but as we've been hinting, things are kind of coalescing, I think. You know, and
with video games,
with video games, look at Ghost of Tsushima. That was an American company, but at that lit a fire under people's asses too. There was one of the creators of Yakuza said that, like, why didn't Japan make this game? You know,
right? And we talked about this another time, and I mentioned that he also said, like, if I were trying to make this game in Japan, the producers bankrolling it would tell me I needed a young guy to be the pretty face of this story, so we can market it and like have a tie-in with some pop song or whatever.
Yeah.
whereas
fuck that shit.
Whereas he's like, this Western development studio comes along and puts a middle-aged guy in there. He's like, we can't put a middle-aged guy as the lead in our game.
Look, again, we're talking about personal experience, anecdotal evidence. So every time I say Japanese people, it's not fucking science. But but in my experience, it just seems like they think their history is so lame. They're so not into it. It's like, talk about bringing up like George Washington to somebody on the street. You know, they're just going to be bored. Like that's how it is for them. But it's just like, dude, especially the samurai and ninja history and all that is so well liked. I don't know why. And if you're making a game just for Japan, that's one thing. But these games are going to sell worldwide, so why aren't you catering to any kind of Western taste whatsoever? I mean, the money should talk, right? But as we saw at Tokyo Game Show, there's like 4 or 5 fucking games that look like Ghost of Tsushima now.
Yeah, the money's talking. It's doing it.
The money's talking, and like, I feel like there's other examples too.
So
the
funny.
Xbox is selling more in Japan. It sold more than PS5 this past week or month.
Wow.
Xbox Series S.
I did not know that. The Series S is such a nice item. It's such a good, like, foot in the door kind of proposition. But yeah,
they're going to take over, dude. Because I love the PS5. I think it's got the best UI, everything like that, et cetera, et cetera. But it is so fucking expensive for most people when you got the Series S right there during this fucking recession that's probably about to happen again, and fucking inflation, all this fucking bullshit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. No wonder, dude. Sony's gonna be eating shit. I'm sorry. I'm a Sony fan. I'm more of a Sony guy, but Sony's gonna be eating it.
Yeah, I don't know. This goes back to something you were saying earlier, right? Like, or it feels almost like the Japanese audiences tend to be more insular with that. Why aren't they looking outside for something like this? And I feel like there's always been that strong adherence to Nintendo and Sony, and there's always been like, let's just ignore the Xbox. And I don't know why, because the Xbox has had so many great games through all the generations. It was the Dreamcast, like, successor, basically. We got Jet Set Radio, we got Shenmue 2, and then we got Sega Smile Bits, like Gun Valkyrie. We even got a Shin Megami Tensei game on that Xbox for Japan. Then the 360 shows up, and Cave's got all their shooters on there. You got Sakaguchi's new studio putting out Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey, and they still don't buy it up. So I don't know, man. I don't really know. It's will they just stick with the Sony each time? Well, and Nintendo's not subject to any of these things, because Nintendo will always just do its thing.
We were in Japan during the 360 days, at least I was. Yeah. Xbox 360. Yep. So I bought one, and I remember going to game stores in Kawagoe, and like, you'd go there and it'd be like, they don't have Xbox games here, but they did, but it was like really pushed back on the shelf, not displayed at all, almost like they're trying to fucking hide them. Like they were just, no one gave a fuck about the 360. The best 360 game I remember playing, other than Halo 3, I guess, was fucking Lost Planet. I loved that game. The Capcom
Yeah, that was
game?
fun. I liked Lost Planet too. I
That was a
didn't play
good
the
one.
sequels. I have them, but I've never played them.
I think it kind of fell off, but that first one was
No.
really good, man. I was so into that.
Yeah.
Um,
It was
yeah.
cool. It was cool. I felt like it deserved a lot more attention than it got. Like it wasn't a great game, but I felt like it was definitely worth playing.
I mean, yeah, and that was Capcom. That was a Japanese made game. I think it was only on Xbox, but yeah, I don't know. They're coming around now.
Mm-hmm.
Switch is still number one. It's going to stay number one, but I mean,
Yeah.
Xbox outselling PlayStation's a big deal. I mean,
I mean, I
that's
don't know how much of that has to do with supply issues. I don't know if
but
are there
still though. It's
it's
going to
not
turn
the
the
same
tide.
as if like the PS5 is sitting sorry, the PS5 is sitting on the shelf and the Xbox Series S is sitting on the shelf and people are grabbing the Series S instead of the PS5. If there are supply issues, then maybe people look elsewhere. But it is interesting and it is surprising to me.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that. I wondered how much the tide will turn slowly but surely, man. I mean, there's a lot of Japanese interest in Dead by Daylight. American, I think it's a Western-made game. A lot of Japanese
Yeah.
interest in what was the other one, man? There's another one that's like Fortnite. That's big.
Mm-hmm.
It's big
So
worldwide.
Fortnite is the kind of thing where I feel like this Fortnite sort of taps into that sort of same Japanese aesthetic that Tokidoki tapped into, right, for their designs, where they're like, we got this really strong, colorful, vibrant, lively stuff here. This is going to work. And it did. And Fortnite is like beautiful and colorful and it just feels so alive. There's no like bald space marine leading it.
That is true, and that's a big reason why it's taken over, right? Like
It's
because
also
it's
third person, which is,
that's
more
true.
accessible for most people.
That's right. Yeah. That again. This was a big difference. This is one of the differences back in like what the late '90s, early 2000s, where first-person shooters had almost no presence whatsoever in Japan. Cut to America and Europe, seemingly anyway. There's it's the only thing people were playing. And that probably, I wonder if you look at gaming taste, at least traditionally, again, things are changing, but take a Japanese otaku, a traditional one, like they're playing Final Fantasy, kawaii characters, they're too old for that shit. Why is this guy in love with the moe characters and all that? And then cut to your American nerd where it's like, brrr, brrr, get that motherfucker, kill him. You know what I mean? Like it's like a little bit more stereotypically manly. So you have like, they're both nerds for games, but this image is totally different, right?
Yeah, definitely. The ultra violence was a big thing for American gaming.
Right.
And like I was part of that zeitgeist too. I was like, oh man, check out these jibs. And I mean, to this day, Insta-jib is like my favorite way to play any kind of shooter online. But it was like jibs. We are
Jibs?
exploding people into giblets.
Oh, I don't even know what that is.
You know?
My main FPS is Doom for just sheer fun factor, but Deathmatch is Halo. I never got into like Call of Duty's too real, man. I don't give a fuck about going to Afghanistan. What is this fucking war propaganda? I want to be a
Yeah.
if I'm going to be a space marine, let's go. If I'm going to be a marine, I'd rather be a space marine. I want to go into space and blow up some aliens.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But I played
Yeah.
Call of Duty for a long time. I don't know. It was that one went yearly, and I still played it because I did have a lot of friends around me who were playing, and we could join up online. It was running 60 frames per second. It had something that like was gratifying in the same way Street Fighter 2 was gratifying for me. Right, when you hit someone, that sound that you get is so good. And the sound and video that you get when you hit someone in Call of Duty is so gratifying. There's the little X that turns up, and it's like a thunk, thunk, thunk kind of sound. And it feels so good to get that. But eventually I was like, I've had enough of this. They can't keep doing this, man. Every year there's another Call of Duty. I'm out. And I never went back to it. And I haven't played like any real competitive shooters. I jump in when something's around, but like Halo was free, so I played that.
Halo's fun.
It was okay.
I'd like to go back to that. I think it was fun enough. I mean, yeah, I always have fun with Halo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some of the best online play actually for me. I'm trying to think of other games. Oh, I tell you what's really great that's actually going to be ending soon is Bomberman 64 or whatever. Not the N64 version, but there's 64. It's free, I think.
64
boards.
64 player. Yeah.
Yeah, 64 online. That's the best Bomberman I've ever played.
Okay.
I
haven't tried
a lot of it. It's ending soon. They're going to cancel the servers, I think, in December or something. But, man, I had a lot of fun. I loved it. I love Bomberman. I've always been a big Bomberman fan. That's some of my favorite multiplayer shit.
I bought it like back on the Saturn and stuff, and I bought the multi-tap or whatever, but I didn't really get into it much because, I don't know, I felt like it took too long to play a match each time. Even though it was nice to have everybody involved, it was like when you got down to two people who could play relatively well, it took a while. And then everybody else was just sitting out. Yeah, the map's too big, or the players are too good at avoiding each other, and it was just like, eh. But I still think it was cool, and I liked the designs, very
Saturn
cute.
Bomberman had great music too, like surprisingly really excellent music. Yeah.
I ended up playing Bust a Move 2 more on the Saturn.
Oh, yeah?
Because I think that 1v1 usually worked out better. It had higher turnover rate. We could take two people and then swap them out for another two people, and everybody would watch them play.
I had Bust a Groove as well, but I think I had it on PS1. My Saturn days were mainly...
Wait, Bust a Groove is...
X-Men versus Street Fighter.
Bust a Groove is a dancing game.
Oh, yeah, I had
Bust
that
a Move is a puzzle bubble.
Puzzle
bubble.
Yeah. I got you. I had that as well.
Me and my bubble.
Yeah, you love that. I mean, I like it too. But what else? Any other cultural differences with gaming that we can bring up?
Yeah, I think that. I don't know. I think that we're still seeing a broader, a wider net being cast in Japan with things just all through the years. I think back to the DS and like all the cool stuff they had on there. And a few of those things broke through here too, like Nintendogs and brain training and stuff like that. But like there they had the kanji kante, they had little dictionaries and stuff. Like people were using the DS not even just for gaming or these little entertainment things. They were like resources.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just feel like it's just a different approach, and they're more open to trying things that are outside of what we would consider the norm.
Right. Why do we more naturally pin ourselves in like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe part of the problem is that marketing is always like at the helm of things, and they think, who can we sell this to? And then they just kind of box themselves in, and then they box all of us in because of it. Whereas
there's some more pure in Japan somehow in that regard.
Is what? Sorry?
They're more pure in that regard. Their marketing is a little bit less evil in some way, or
I think that maybe their marketing is not so hyper focused on finding a target demographic for big sales as it is focused on selling the product to the right people. Like the person who wants to buy Ninja Town might not want to buy Kanji Kante.
Right.
But you can still have a commercial for each of them, and it's going to reach the people who want it.
Right.
And if it doesn't, that's okay.
Yeah, I always wonder that. I mean, like with all the differences we've talked about today, it does feel like in many ways, they don't box themselves in as much as we do. And we always think they're, at least stereotypically, the notion about Japan was that they're more close-minded because of them being a monoculture or whatever, monolithic, homogeneous, right?
Right. And I mean, that's its own kind of myth too. So.
Yeah, I don't know. And the acceptance for subcultures as well was always a little bit better in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading that they, like, back in the day, this is probably not a thing anymore, but like the whole skateboarders versus rollerbladers stupid thing back in the day, like that never existed in Japan. People would like, if you actually did skateboard and rollerblade, no one ever really gave a shit, which is how it should be anyway.
Yeah. But like, so let's consider this from our own experience, right? We've talked about you said that your mom enjoyed games, right? So like, what kinds of games did your mom like?
Tetris and Mario.
Okay.
And Galaga.
Let's take a look at like the Genesis's early advertising. Did your mom want to get a Genesis? Did she buy anything? Like, did she buy Sonic?
No, my mom basically got out of gaming at Mario 3, honestly. I feel like that was the last time, like, Super Nintendo was like clearly what we were into. And I don't remember her being into that at all. Like, gaming to her was mainly that early 80s stuff, like Pac-Man and Galaga. And there was some monkey game she always brought up. Then I eventually found out what it was, and it was called Amadir. Amadir. It's not great, but I Googled it one time. There's a Reddit called Tip of My Joystick. And like, you can describe a game and people will help you find it. And that's what I did with that one. She might have played some games here and there, like Wii Sports maybe, but yeah, Genesis and Super Nintendo. But I think, especially Genesis, she was not playing that shit.
But so what I'm getting at with this, right, is like, maybe that's part of the thing, is that, once there started to become more of a market, the NES taking hold, and they started just really aggressively marketing things in a certain way, right? Sega's marketing was like, blast processing,
Sega! I remember,
kick ass, you're amazing.
I did a book report where I opened up with Sega when I was a kid.
But like, it clearly was them saying, like, we're going to target the aggressive boys, and we're going to lead them to being more aggressive. And this is how we're going with things now. And so maybe that's it. It's kind of like you get that feeling of, I guess this isn't really for me anymore, or this isn't really for everyone anymore.
So they said on some documentaries that Sega's strategy was to get the older brother. And then if the older brother plays it, then it'll be cool for the younger brother, and so on.
Right. And so they didn't go for the mom. They didn't go for the sister.
No.
Right. And then you have all these people to this day who carry around this weird notion that gaming is for boys, and any girl who games has to be fake somehow. It's just completely asinine.
Right.
Like, you don't see that in movies. Like, women watching movies? That's crazy.
It has to do with subject matter. Man, this is a whole other topic, but like, it did seem when we were gaming back in the day, and up until, God, I would say 10 years ago or so, at least from my point of view, women were kind of less into games. But in recent years, it feels like that divide is growing to be non-existent.
Yeah.
I think you see.
Well, I think that's because a lot of the barriers are gone.
Women of all ages, especially younger. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
As I say, like, a lot of that has to do with, like, the gaming is available on like everything, especially phones.
Right. But even console gaming with games like Animal Crossing and shit like that. Games that aren't like full of testosterone all the time.
Yeah.
Those are. And, Final Fantasy as well. That's what they used to say. They used to say this in EGM, actually, girls are mainly into RPGs and puzzle games.
Right.
That might be somewhat sexist, but there was maybe some kernel of truth there. But anyway, we're getting off topic there. But with Japanese taste with the dating sims, that's again another taste difference that's sort of seeping its way in now, and the visual novel dating sim kind of thing. But that's always been a thing in Japan. You know?
Yeah, I don't know if Tokimeki was the first one. It's the first one I knew of, and I remember hearing about it back then and just being like, No, I don't know why I would play that. That's not really
It was not the first one at all, I don't think. Tim Rogers had like a 3-hour video on that, didn't he?
Yeah, I didn't watch it because I don't go for Tokimeki or anything like that.
Man,
that was never what I was looking for in games.
Yeah. I tried to get Tim Rogers on the show, but he never responded. I think he's too famous now.
Yeah. That's fine. You know?
Yeah, it's fine. I guess that's it, right? Pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to effectively and fully cover this topic or anything. We don't have any definitive answers, and we may never have them. But there are differences in taste. We've explored them as we know them. I'm sure we could talk another hour about it, but it's a never-ending topic.
It's never ending. I mean, but these differences are the reasons people get into Japan, including myself. At times it seems, especially at first glance, it's so different, it's almost like it shouldn't exist, but it does exist, and that's what makes it so exciting and interesting. It would suck if there was only one way. So it's always great to see a different way, different perspective, and see how that comes out in media. So... I guess that's it. Let us know what you thought in the comments, everybody. Patreon is chugging along, and we'll catch you later.
Thank you.